I have seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all.
So a deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this wonderful land of ours. I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we face and that affects so many aspects of our daily lives. And if you want to join the conversation today, the number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'm happy to have you join in. And we got a lot to talk about. It's been a tumultuous couple of weeks, culminating in the inauguration just last Friday, and then also on top of that, some of the demonstrations around the country. What a time we're going through right now in our great country. What a time. And if ever the need for civil discourse were great, it is now. Really, the need for civil discourse, I don't think, has ever been greater, because I don't think we've ever been this divided. And we're not just divided on little matters. We're divided on a host of really major issues, and we're deeply divided. Very, very deeply divided. And it would take a lot of character to properly unify this country. And I'm afraid that I don't see that character forthcoming just yet. We'll see. You know, I need to explain some things. I've garnered a reputation over the years as being an expert on personality and character disordered individuals. And there's a difference between personality and character disorders. You can be disordered in personality and not necessarily be disordered in character, because character is that moral side of personality. It's that aspect of your personality that reflects your internal moral compass, your level of social conscientiousness, your personal ethics and integrity. That's the character side of personality. And I've had this reputation, and I've written about it in my books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People. Many regard it as the landmark book on the topic, published in many foreign languages now. And then character disturbance, the phenomenon of our age, my in-depth study of this phenomenon of our time that we call character disturbance, why we have it and what we need to do about it, and what good therapy to intervene with it looks like, et cetera, et cetera. And then my book, The Judas Syndrome, for the Christian faith community, for a mindful reflection on how genuine faith can really save a troubled soul. And then lastly, my book with Dr. Kathy Armistead, How Did We End Up Here? A book, by the way, which I couldn't get enough copies rushed to me in time for sale on my last workshop tour. We sold out in the early morning hours of the second workshop, and I had no more books to sell for that entire workshop and for the workshop that followed. Really disappointed in that. But that book, being The Toxic Relationship Survivor's Guide to Living in This Crazy, Mixed Up, Character Disturbed World of Ours. So I've gained this reputation, and, some months back I had an opportunity to be on the Lawrence O'Donnell program, The Last Word, on MSNBC. And politically, I consider myself a very staunch independent. I see merit to both sides of the argument on many issues. But I'm always disturbed by folks that are stuck in such extreme camps on one side or another that they can't reach amicable compromise, and they can't get anything done. So I've always maintained my political independence. So I was a little nervous about going on the O'Donnell program because MSNBC has a very definite and self-acknowledged liberal bias to it. And most particularly, I was a little hesitant because I knew how vehemently opposed to a Trump presidency they would be. And I wanted to be very careful in choosing my words because the truth of the matter is that there's no shortage of character disturbance on Capitol Hill. Character disturbance is a funny thing. You can be a pretty impaired character, and then you can have an awful lot of polish to you. You can have an awful lot of charms, sophistication, grace. You can carry yourself very well. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're a person of real integrity. Matter of fact, you can even show some flashes of integrity, and that doesn't mean that you're really a completely decent person. So I was very careful. I knew that what they would prefer is if I go on as a professional, and then I do a really intense character hatchet job. And I didn't want to do that. I certainly didn't want the issue of character to slip away, because nothing is going to prove more important to us than that very issue. And I do know for a fact that we have some really trying times ahead. Folks are very uneasy about what happened during the election. It's fairly actually understandable to me. I understand it. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm all that comfortable with the results. But it does mean that I understand. I understand where many, many people were coming from. Tired of just simply being ignored and misunderstood. and used and abused in a way. And boy, did they make their voices be heard. With the exception of two major population centers on either coast, it would have been a significant victory for Mr. Trump, even in the popular vote. It's staggering thought. But it tells you a lot about where we are and about our country and about the things that matter. I'm nervous. I have to admit that, and I'm doing an awful lot of praying these days for our welfare and for our country's welfare. My wife and I were having a discussion today about the whole concept of restoring American greatness. And whether that's going to be done by making us the economic powerhouse that someone envisions we might be again, the military force that someone envisions we might have again, or the other areas of power that we might be able to flex our muscle in again. As the theme song that opens and closes this program attempts to assert, if you listen carefully to the lyrics, I think you can hear the message. At least I hope you can hear the message. That was the intention. And even though de Tocqueville never said it, he would have been right in saying it. And he's often quoted as saying that America is great because it's good. And when it ceases being good, it'll cease being great. So the underlying theme in the theme song that you hear open and close this program is that freedom and character are so interconnected. They're inextricably interconnected. They're completely mutually dependent upon one another. When good people are left alone and given maximum freedom, afforded maximum opportunity, when people who have a solid ethical, moral guide operating in them, then wonderful, truly great things happen. And when individuals don't rise to the occasion, when there are all too many of us who don't have the basics of common decency in us, so that we act the fool and we act like animals, there's always the temptation. There's always the appearing, the apparent necessity for abridging freedom, for restricting freedom. If the folks are unruly, you've got to kind of micromanage them. That's how it works. And too many of us have gotten out of hand. And it's not just these egregious examples. The reason, I'm giving you my opinion here now, the reason folks like Donald Trump evoke such ire is because their crassness is simply out there in the open. The ugliness in their character, the brutishness, the banality, all that stuff is just out there. They don't make any bones about it. And that's what turns some people, not all people, some people really off. But I'm not so sure what's worse. Somebody who's all out there unabashedly so, letting you know who they are, letting you know what maybe kind of pathological overconfidence they have, what disdain they have for the weak and the inferior as they see it. It's one thing to see that in a very brash form, a very ugly, crude form, and be revolted by it. But it's another thing to have it be underneath the surface in a more insidious way, where someone is capable of a great deal of charm. They're capable even what looks like a great deal of apparent civility and even sensitivity. And yet they still have the same destructive narcissism about them, where they don't really acknowledge the possibility that they could have it all wrong, and where they don't really feel the obligation to make sure they get it right, when all that really matters is them and their agenda and looking great and winning as they see it. And the common good just kind of slips away as a goal. My heart aches for all of us right now. I've been writing on the blog at manipulative-people.com about the 10 commandments of sound character development. These are the commandments that folks have to learn when they're developing their characters, and that can be in their early formative years. That would be ideal if during their early formative years they mastered the important lessons that these 10 learning imperatives that I call the 10 commandments of sound character development highlight. It'd be great if they mastered those things in their early childhood so that they could grow up into really responsible adults. But the 10 commandments of character I've been writing about are good for anybody at any age. Just as good for those who are just beginning to develop their character, and just as good for those who developed, unfortunately, a problematic one and need to rebuild a new one, whether that be in early adulthood, whether that be in middle life, or even later now. It's been a phenomenon of our time that in private practices all across the country for social workers, clinical social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, licensed counselors, marital and family therapists, addiction therapists. What we've been facing, all of us, for so long, is a character crisis the like of which we've never seen, and it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon at all for someone to be coming in to the therapist office with character-related issues in their 60s, sometimes even in their 70s, sometimes later. Some folks just seem to have a really hard time getting it. It's a sad commentary on our time, but it is the time. It is our time. So I've been writing about these 10 learning imperatives that I call the 10 commandments of character. And they're dear to me. They are dear to me. in my workshops, I touch on them only briefly. And God willing, fairly soon now, hopefully in the spring, my final book with Dr. Kathy Armistead, The 10 Commandments of Character, How to Lead a Significant Life, will be available to you. We really need to look seriously at what it is we need to do to build that character that's so essential to everyone's life, so that they don't make foolish relationship decisions, entering into one for untoward purposes and then having it break up so early, without assistance, and with kids hanging in the balance. We just see all too much of that today. All too much. The real way we're going to be great again. This is the point I try to drive home in the song, in a message. I try to send a sentiment, and that I've written about and will continue to write about, especially in my new book. The thing that really matters is character. I give credit to Martin E.P. Seligman because he's the one that says it in the book on page 18 of Character Disturbance. I might just read that to you. I'll tell you a little story about it too. I'm going to grab something off the shelf here. Martin was a research psychologist, a very famous one. He is responsible for giving us a wonderful paradigm that we call the learned helplessness paradigm. And in this paradigm, he demonstrated in these classic experiments replicated several times, he demonstrated that when it appears to any organism that nothing they do, no action they take, will make a difference in the outcome of events over which they have some ability to control. When you set up a situation where nothing seems to make a difference, no matter what you do, you can't affect the outcome. Then these organisms start to feel helpless, and then hopeless. And then they give up trying, thinking to themselves, more than likely, what's the use? Nothing I do is going to affect change anyway. And the experiment even goes on. So when the animal reaches this point, when the mouse reaches that point of despair where they no longer think that anything they do will make a difference, and they bought into that, then if you actually change the experiment so that what they do does make a difference, it doesn't matter. They still won't engage because they've already given up hope. And there's so many features of that paradigm that apply to individuals in abusive relationships. But I got the book down from the shelf to read this quote from Martin Seligman because he was one of those folks who not only gave us this wonderful paradigm, but he was also one of the leading proponents of a new worldview of psychology that didn't even concern itself with such nebulous terms as character. Terms and concepts that when you really start to nail them down, it doesn't become all that clear what you're really talking about, what there really is. So he spent his career working with rats and making generalizations from what kinds of things would happen in the lab under certain contingencies. But Martin, I'm going to give him credit, had an epiphany later in his life. And this is what he has to say. After a detour through the hedonism of the 60s, the narcissism of the 70s, the materialism of the 80s, and the apathy of the 90s, most people today seem to believe that character is important after all, and that right now in our country, in our great land, in our culture, we are enjoying, I'm quoting again, we are facing, rather, a character crisis on many fronts, from the playground to the classroom, to the sports arena, to the Hollywood screen, to business corporations, to politics. We've got a character problem. And character does matter. It matters more than anything else. And so that's what I went on to say on the Lawrence O'Donnell program when I had the chance. I pointed out that inside the Beltway, there is no shortage of ego. There's no shortage even of narcissism. There's no shortage. The shortage there is the willingness to behave civilly and responsibly. And the other thing that's different is the threshold is so much higher. Folks have grown so tolerant and so used to, we call this habituation, so habituated to certain really negative aspects of our environment that most people no longer think certain things we just knew were just completely wrong. We don't think they're wrong anymore. It's a really, really sad thing what's happened to us. I understand. I understand the tough time that we're going to be going through. But we can all play a part in making this better. It is time for those silent to not be silent anymore. It is time for a civil discourse, the likes of which we have not yet seen, but we must have. We have to talk to each other. We have to meet each other. We have to engage each other, and we have to do it with such humility, grace, and responsibility that we don't try and shove our mutual agendas down each other's throat. That's just not going to cut it. we will truly have to love our way to health. This is always the case. This is always the case. Even in some of the ugliest messages put forth in the brashest of ways, the most offensive of ways by our current president-elect, many times there is truth. And when there is truth, we need to be able to deal with it. Of course, when there isn't truth, that often is the case too, we need to call it out. But there's no shortage of lying, there's no shortage of manipulation, there's no shortage of spinning anywhere on Capitol Hill. Narcissism didn't just visit us for the first time with our president-elect. And notice once again, I did not say, nor will I say, because it's inappropriate to say, that what we're talking about here is a narcissistic personality disorder, and one so severe that it could cause catastrophe across the country. I'm not saying that. I refuse to say that, actually. First of all, it would be wrong to. But we must be ever mindful. We must be ever mindful. We've placed certain powers in an individual's hands. The button to the nuclear arsenal, the trigger, the power to change many other things just through executive order. It could all be done in the blink of an eye, with a snap of a finger. So we need more than anything, we need, rather than just being at each other's throats, we need civil discourse. Open, honest, no holds barred, but all folks respected. And all folks heard, really heard, receptively heard. So we can get where we need to go. We are the country. We're the government. There's nothing without us. If none of us vote, and the others aren't allowed to, how do they get elected? It doesn't happen. This is the turn of a new era. I sense it in my bones. It's the turn of a new era, and everyone will be playing a part, including our president-elect. And I truly don't just wish him well. I wish the country well. I wish you well. And I know that that's largely going to happen when we get back to living the way we were meant to live. That's what will make the difference. That's how we change the world. Not with brute force, not with threats, not with grandiose schemes and plots. It's one step at a time, one heart and soul. One heart and soul at a time. That's why That's why years ago, my wife and I produced this song that you hear at the beginning and the end. We had a rekindling of our patriotic spirit. And it wasn't that classic kind of America do or die kind of thing. It was an appreciation for all the blessings that we really do enjoy. Some of which, many of which, comes from the goodness of our people, comes because of the goodness of our people. And so we have a lot to be grateful for, a whole lot to be grateful for, and that gratefulness leads naturally to a sense of obligation or indebtedness. It leads to a sense of indebtedness, and that in turn leads to a set of indebtedness that we really owe something back. It leads to a sense of obligation, an obligation to repay a really, really serious debt incurred. And so if you listen carefully to the song's lyrics when it closes tonight, that's what it will be telling you. That's what it was going to be telling you. It's about honoring, embracing, and cherishing all of the principles we've already learned far better than most folks. Most everybody over the age of 50 has at least heard character and its importance. Most of us have had to learn that the hard way in our intimate relationships. That's one of the reasons why I'm going across the country training professionals once again. I don't want any more victims of abusive and manipulative relationships writing me and saying the same thing time after time after time after time. Dr. Simon, I need some advice. I went for help. I went for help and I didn't get it. Not only that, I ended up feeling worse because I tried my best to get the therapist to see what was really going on, but my manipulative partner was so good at the art of what we call impression management that he had things completely snowed, had the wool completely pulled over one's eyes. And that's not the only example of how therapy-induced trauma can happen. So for that reason, when I started feeling up to it last year, I started doing these training workshops again all across the country. And I can't tell you how gratifying it is. Having the book, journaling, that matters. That matters too. But it's not the only thing. So I'm out there now training professionals and hoping that the perspective and the tools that I give them will empower them in their work so that when you go to them, you get the help you need, especially when you're going to them with issues related to either being in or having been in a relationship with a pretty disturbed character. Now, I'm going to have my eyes very closely on President Trump. Very closely. And I'm going to be looking for all of those indications that folks really not only get it, but really want to play a hand in remedying this problem. We have here a land, a place with such potential. And what it needs now more than anything else is a revolution in character. And when we're great in character individually, we'll be great as a country collectively. It's just as simple as that. That's how it works. We're going to get a crash course in the most brash, crude, and aggressive or bullyish form of narcissism. We're going to get a crash course in that. We're going to come to expect it. Some people will make fun of it. Some people will parody it. But the real deal, the real issue is, will we learn from it? And if we do learn, what will we learn? Just precisely what will we learn? That's the most important thing. I hope one of the lessons that we learn, all of us, is that character does indeed matter. It matters more than anything. If it didn't, we wouldn't be witnessing what we're witnessing right now, especially with regard to the protests that have developed in one place or another, and by one group or another. We will see. Time will be the tell. Time will be the telling factor. As I've said many times before, even those impaired characters who are determined to win at all costs and who hate looking bad because they want to be admired. That's what drives them, is that lust for adulation. Folks like that will often do some pretty remarkable things. Some of us like to say that God can work through anybody. I think that's what we're likely to see, at least to a certain extent, in this upcoming presidency. My heart aches for the country. It really does. I look at the divisions and I say, there's just so much work to do here. Restoring our families. I mean, really restoring them. Not just keeping them intact with a dad at home and a mom that loves them, but all intimate relationships, that they be of the kind of character that unifies and promotes life, reveres life, instead of serving some self-serving, pleasurable need or want. Those kinds of relationships that are rooted in what I mentioned in my blog article for this last week about being of sincere heart and purpose. That's the 10th commandment, which we're going to spend some time on. Come visit us at manipulative-people.com from time to time. You'll see the treatment we're going to be giving these things. But it's important. It's important to take seriously the axioms, the imperatives. They're not suggestions. They are commands. Do this and you will be more whole, more complete. We just need to do it and do it over and over again. And that's how it becomes habit. Good habit. That's how it becomes a virtue. And so as I was writing about in last Friday's post, one of the commands, the last command, to be of sincere heart and purpose. What does that mean? It means no pretense, that you're authentic, that you're genuine, that people know who you are, what you're all about, what you're made of, what you value, what you don't value, who you value, who you don't value, and why. All those things influence a person's character, tells us who they are. And so the 10th command has to do with being of sincere heart and purpose. Nothing phony. Nothing phony. Nothing devious. Nothing deceptive. Nothing so horribly deceptive that you effectively seduce someone on the front end of a relationship and then reveal yourself to be the absolute pig that you might be after the relationship is not new anymore, and after you've used and abused the relationship partner and are all already ready to move on. Yeah, not that kind of scenario. I also want to share with you that I'm going back on the road again next week. This time I'll be in Missouri. And on Wednesday, well, I won't be in Missouri the whole time, but on Wednesday, I will be in Wichita, Kansas. And then on Thursday, I'll be in Overland Park, just outside of Kansas City. And then on Friday, I'll be in St. Louis. I'll be finishing my round of workshops that Friday. And then in early February, beginning Wednesday the 8th, I'll be back in California. I'll be in San Francisco February 8th, Wednesday, February 8th. I'll be in Berkeley Thursday, February the 9th. And I'll be in Sacramento on Friday, the 10th. And I hope that if you have wanted to enter into a dialogue, if you have questions about character disturbances, Even if you're not a mental health professional, I do these workshops at a level where even uh, laypersons off the street, just interested in my work and interested in the overall framework that I use to address character-related problems. Those folks find these workshops helpful too. So I encourage you, come out. You can register on site. I know that the workshops already have a substantial attendance, but there's always room for one more, and you can register on site. So uh, come out if you wish. And you're also free to always call on this program and ask questions, share situations, lend your opinion, uh, talk things out. If you want to talk tonight, if you want to join the conversation, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'll be very happy to take your call. Well, I want to say a thank you to the folks in California. I was treated to something really quite special uh, on the drive up from Fresno to San Jose, going through the mountain range there that nestles a couple of lakes, and it's generally gorgeous country. The state's been in a fantastic drought for the last several years, and they've really needed rain, and they've really needed snow at the higher elevations, and they've really needed it to pack and remain for a while so that they could get the benefit of the slow snowmelt. Well, this year looks like the year that's going to be quite possible. And the whole time I was out there, just about outside of just a couple of hours, that when I arrived, it was raining and snowing in the higher elevations. And so I'm on the drive up from Fresno to San Jose, and I'm just about to approach this beautiful mountain pass, and the sky clears for just long enough, 5, 10 minutes, 5, 10 minutes. The sky clears, the sun comes out, and the colors and the hues, especially because of the more recent rains, are just absolutely spectacular. It was just absolutely beautiful. And it just kind of brought the message home. It said to me, it spoke to me, it said, this land, wow. What richness it possesses, what natural beauty it possesses. And it can have beauty of character too. We can restore it. We can restore the national character by restoring our own. And we do that by modeling the kind of behavior we wish other people would show. And we attract that to them. We form relationships that are built on solid ground, on mutual trust and respect. That's what we do. It's not easy work, but it's relatively straightforward work. That's how we'll restore the character of America. That's how we'll make America truly great again. As I say in the introduction to the song that you'll hear at the close, when I introduce it online, and even in packages when I'm giving rights to the song for performances by performers all across the country, I make the point that America's greatness has never resided really in its military power or its economic might. That's not where its greatness has ever really line. You know, even in World War II, when the greatest generation stepped up and helped save the world, it wasn't just the economic engine being turned on again, producing armaments. It wasn't that. And it wasn't all the money that got poured in through borrowing and other means. It wasn't that. What really saved us is all those folks that rose to the occasion and stood up for freedom and against domination and against racism and bigotry in all forms. And we must do that same thing again because we face the very same threat again, big time. My wife and I just joined an organization that promotes peace and social justice. When I retire from active practice and from all the road trips, I'm going to be devoting a lot more of my time and energy to this enterprise. We'll do our part to help make America great again and to do it the right way, which is touching hearts and minds, converting hearts and minds, and doing that in a peaceful, just, and civil way. The next 4 years are going to be very interesting. One thing will become abundantly clear, whether we like it or not, whether we choose to recognize it or not. The issue will be forced upon us about how important character is. Maybe it'll prove so important that once and for all, what will matter most at the ballot box is the character for whom we are voting. I remember that meaning a lot back even in my own youth, and I'm not that old. Of course I am old, but I'm not that old. So it is with hope and goodwill and a lot of prayer and a lot of committed effort on my part and the part of many others who are joining movements to really promote what it's going to take to bring us together. I have some hopes that we will truly be great again because we'll be great in character again. Let's all do our part. Please avail yourself of my books on Amazon, in your bookstore as digital downloads, barnesandnoble.com as well. Character Disturbance, the Phenomenon of Our Age, In Sheep's Clothing, The Judas Syndrome, and How Did We End Up Here? And pay a visit to my blog at manipulative-people.com. And tune in again next week, right here on UCY.tv for another edition of Character Matters on Sunday evening. Until then, I'm Dr. George Simon. Thank you for listening. I'll see you again next week on another edition of Character Matters. Take care.